When I think about this industry, I really dream of a world where you don't need insurance brokers or consultants. That would mean to me that the system is working.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're a long, long ways from that. And so what you need is a very solid consultant that can actually go through and understand the underpinnings of the plan, how it aligns to your business, and what to do about it.
Thanks for tuning in to the Self-Funded with Spencer podcast. Let's go make healthcare better together. We talked about mission and vision and values over coffee, and we're starting, by the way. That's really important, is like we need to work together, whether it's Pareto or something else, working together to actually go, what is your goal? Where are you trying to get? And we're going to provide a framework in order for you to get there, rather than me dictating to you what you're supposed to do, right? And I think listening to employers, they all have unique business challenges, right? And so if you listen and actually hear what they're saying and what they want to do, you can map that out.
Correct. And I think that should always be your first question to the business owner. Where are you trying to go today?
Yep.
What are you doing in your business to get there? And then how do we align your benefits program to your business plan so that it makes sense?
I love it, man. Well, Trey, why don't we introduce you? We start talking. And I actually like to do it that way, because that way, if we have an interesting conversation that's already going on, we can keep that in the show. But Trey, why don't you introduce yourself? Who are you? Yeah, who do you work for? All that good stuff, man.
Trey Halbert, CEO of ExperINS. We're an employee benefits agency, typically working with companies that have 200 to 2,000 employees located anywhere around the globe. Okay. Our goal is to protect 1 million families and actually do strategy first benefits and people first service.
Yeah. Well, I love that. Strategy first benefits and people first service. And we were talking about your culture over coffee, and I definitely want to highlight your culture. But the name ExperINS, I think it's worth explaining. I even think I probably mispronounced it the first time I read it. So tell me how you guys came up with that name.
It's a great thing, and not all ideas are good ideas. So let's just talk about how this one started. It was really a mashup of experts in insurance. That was the starting point. And then if you think about experience in our industry, they look at premium, they look at claims, and that's called your loss ratio or your experience. And then 2 levels down from that are really important is, what is the client experience when they work with us? Okay. And lastly, what's the member experience in the time of need when they actually need someone to step in and help them on claims issues, is to say, what's that patient or member experience look like? And that was really the genesis of the firm.
And it's written out for people that don't see it. Experi is capitalized, or Exper is capitalized, and then INS is all in all caps, right? So it's ExperINS, it's a mashup. And I love the name, man. But I just, obviously, the first time you see it, anything that's novel, you're trying to sound it out and figure it out. Now that you've fully explained it, I go, that's obviously a brilliant name, and I'm glad you guys came up with it. How many iterations and versions of names did you go through, like kind of like naming a baby? How many times did you get it wrong before you felt you got it right?
Well, I'm not certain that it's right yet. I think there's an opportunity to figure out how do we actually make it easier for people to see and spell, because like we do run into that problem. But the thought of it from the beginning was, we didn't want our last name on the door.
Yeah.
We didn't want it to be like Gallagher or Frost or something like that, or Mercer. We wanted it to be something that's bigger than us as an organization, solving bigger than us types of problems, and really wanted everyone in the organization to feel like they're part of a solution instead of just working for someone's last name.
I love it, man. I love it. Well, let's get your background, man, because you've been in benefits a long time. As much as you can and want to share about who you are in your bio and how you ended up in Austin and all that good stuff. Sure. Would like to get to know you a little bit better before we fully dig in. Yeah.
I'll try not to bore everyone to tears with it, but I got into benefits while I was in college. I was a biochem major, and ultimately trying to get out of the bar restaurant business.
Okay.
At that point in time, I had hair down to here, and I thought people with curly hair had it easy, so I got a perm. And
was this the 90s?
Yeah, it was definitely the 90s. Right. And perms aren't cool if you're a guy, no matter when you do it. But I thought you'd just be able to like flick your hair and be ready for the day. Not true. Curly hair is definitely difficult. But my first job was actually helping people that were retired military people enroll in Champus or TRICARE, which was the first ever PPO and HMO. Yeah. So that was the first time they had managed care, and also the first time that retired military people had to pay for their coverage. So I was really in at the beginning of managed care. That quickly turned. I lost my dad in a car accident and ended up leaving school and came back to Dallas and needed a job. So I went to work for Blue Cross, and they had acquired a TPA called Healthcare Benefits Incorporated. And that TPA was really uniquely positioned at that point in time because we had the ability to use like outside networks, outside PBMs, outside stop loss, utilization review, pre-cert, and everything. So we were at the forefront of healthcare and doing things differently and actually designing programs for employers that actually made sense and helped them accomplish their objectives. And that company grew wildly. I think we grew about 2,200% year over year. And it also grew with a lot of problems because we weren't prepared to actually solve some of those things at scale. But that's kind of the genesis of it. And then
what do you think at the time, when around was this, like, time frame?
That was 93, 94 through 96.
Yeah, and it's certainly not to just target or demonize Blue Cross, but like that sounds like a lot more flexible than they maybe are today in terms of what's doable around the architecture or the framework of a TPA. Why do you think they were so open at that point?
I think at that point in time, you had a couple of other people starting to happen or do this, like ASO North America down in Houston was one. And so I think Blue Cross was proactively looking for a solution to kind of get into that TPA market so that they could do things that were more flexible. But they also had some of the realities of their mindset was designed to do traditionally fully insured or ASO business. And so being able to break that apart created channel conflict because you were wondering, are you doing what's best for the corporate home office? Are we using Blue Cross paper? Are we using Blue Cross utilization review, et cetera? Are we using Blue Cross PBMs? Or do we do what's right for the client? And there was also a little bit of fear and concern, I believe, at that point in time around how exposed are we willing to be by letting other people know kind of how we're pricing some of this as well. And so it was an interesting time because I got to learn a whole lot. And my main representatives that I called on were Blue Cross sales reps. And so I had to go teach them about self-funding oftentimes.
Yeah.
And then take one step further, gain enough trust and respect with the local sales reps to oftentimes go present directly to the clients or prospects because the brokers were unfamiliar. The traditional reps were oftentimes uninformed or undereducated about the program. And so they kind of had me go out there and help along in that process. It was kind of an interesting deal. It brought me closer to the client because I wanted to work with the end user and figure out how they are actually trying to solve these problems. And I think that part of that came through in who we are even as a firm today.
Was that where you were first introduced to the idea of self-funding in general?
It was.
How long did it take you to pick it up, just out of curiosity?
Well, I think I got lucky. So when I joined HBI, I was in customer service and claims. And so I think that process taught me to understand where's the friction point, because I was getting calls from members that didn't understand stuff.
Yep.
I was processing claims, so I understood kind of what was happening from the hospital or provider side and how that was actually being processed in claims. And so that was a really great place to learn. And then I finally cut off that perm and I got seven promotions in the next 3 years.
Were we punk rock back in the day? Like if you had hair down to your chest and curly, tell me about your style.
Well, it was terrible, I think. Birkenstock sandals are pretty cool. And I don't know, after the first perm, I tried it again with the body wave type of perm. It was awful. And so finally,
especially being in our industry too. Were you rocking a ponytail when you?
I would put it in. I would put it in a ponytail because back then I was young and taking time to dry that thing sometimes took a lot of work. But it was funny. I had a lady. She can remain nameless, but when she hired me, she's like, "Trey, you're going to need to cut your hair." So I went to 5 different places, and then I finally cut off 2.5 inches. I thought, hey, I've completely cut it all off. And I got to work and she's like, I meant more than that.
Yeah.
And so when I finally got it cut a little bit closer, I tried to model it after George Clooney back in those days.
Right on.
And that's when the promotion started to happen.
There was a correlation between those two things.
Yeah.
I remember I played soccer in college and long hair was kind of cool where you could put a little headband on, but I never got it that far. I think I got it somewhere around chin level or so. Yeah. And at some point, to what you were saying earlier, it's ridiculous to try to take care of. Yeah. Never, to me, looked actually good. I just thought it was cool. And I'm like, thank God I've got past that phase completely.
Chronic health issues, surprise out-of-network medical bills, inflated medical and prescription drug prices. These issues cost self-insured employers hundreds of millions of dollars every year. Add to this the rising cost of care and potential for waste across the life of a claim, and it's clear that self-insured employers need innovative solutions that lower their health plan spend. At Valence, we've done just that, developed innovation that shifts the current paradigm. A complete and integrated ecosystem solution driven by data, one that manages and simplifies the complexity of medical claim costs. It is through analyzing millions of data points that we enable employers to realize and fuel cost-saving solutions. Valence experts come prepared from day one, targeting the fraction of claims that will drive the majority of health plan costs. That is how our team lives the Valence promise, engaging early and often for smarter, better, faster healthcare.
Agreed.
But when did you come over to the consulting side or the broker side?
So that happened for the first time in 03. So I went from customer service and claims up to sales and sales management. And then ultimately for a number of years, I wanted to be on the consulting side.
Okay.
And I had
What was the draw to you?
Well, once I got on the vendor side selling for the carriers, I got to work with some different brokers and consultants, and I found some people that were doing it really well and others that weren't.
Okay.
And so I had some friends over at MHBT that I really felt were doing a good job. And so I basically said, I'll come over and work for free. So I took a job for $0.00 as a way to get in on the other side.
Producing
actually,
or what? Yeah, okay.
To produce and actually get in front of clients. And those first 3 months were horrifying. I thought, I'd alienated my personal and professional network because I knew a lot of brokers and consultants. Now I'm competing with them. And then I thought, oh my gosh, I can't sell anything.
Yeah.
Because I was reaching out to people and no one wanted to talk about benefits. But what I found is that people did want to talk about their business. And so month 4 was when I had my first ever sale. And then that kind of created a journey where I was like, let's get in front of more employers and let's help more employers succeed.
Do you remember that story of that sale at all? Yeah. Is that something you'd be able to share?
Yeah, I can share this one really closely, really quickly. So it was like month 3.5, and I'm calling anybody that I know. I mean, imagine like joining a life insurance company or something. Like you call everybody. And one of my buddies had gone to work for a granite fabricator.
Okay.
And I called him up. I'm like, hey, I think you know the owner pretty well. Can we talk about benefits? He's like, I need health insurance and we don't have it. And so I walked over, I met with that owner, and through that discussion realized that his wife had a lot of health issues and that actually we could align solving some of their problems with their employees and his family by actually putting a health plan in place. So we put in Virgin coverage on that account, and that was the very first company I ever worked with.
That's awesome, man. But I think what probably reinforced to you is like you're going in and actually helping human beings, helping business owners solve problems. But I think you talked about over coffee a little bit that you're helping people probably in their most vulnerable times of their lives, or whether it's despair, the cost issue, stress, anxiety, all that stuff. You actually get to see that happen, right? I think sometimes we get somewhat removed in that chain of events and you forget like, oh, on the other side of this decision is a human being that's either positively or negatively impacted by it. And I always try to keep that in mind when we're going through our sales process and things like that.
It's so true. I think our business is really the closest thing to altruistic behavior that you can have, because you can have some impact on something that impacts millions of dollars for the business. And just as importantly, ultimately for people that you never meet. So by doing the right thing for members in their time of crisis or need, or when they're encountering the healthcare system, you can profoundly impact them. And they may never know that you did it, may never meet you, but it's a chance to actually do something good in this space. And I find like that's very rewarding about this industry.
Well, so did you find after that first sale was made that you thought, oh, I think I can actually make a career out of this?
I did. It took a good while to actually get that career to live up to how I was living before that. So put a little bit extra credit card debt on as I was kind of going through that experience.
Well, what made you bet so much on the notion that you could be a good consultant, right? And take no income for 3 months and try to survive? You clearly believed either in yourself or that as a career path, right?
I think really the start of it, Spencer, was realizing how broken the system was and how ineffective most of the people were that were in the chain of custody for how do we actually go through and buy this. You're talking about one of the top 3 to 5 items on a P&L. And ultimately, people buy it. They do more research on buying a refrigerator than they do on buying their health plan. And so I saw that as a level of brokenness that I felt like done correctly, we as consultants could actually make a profound impact on these businesses and on these underlying people by helping reveal kind of what's happening on the cost side of the equation and helping them chart a path to a better outcome.
Yeah, and to your point about people do more research on a TV or a refrigerator, all that's true. But like, think how easy it is for you and me to go do research on a refrigerator, whether it's using Amazon or some sort of like review service. And then you're going to compare side by side and all the features and find the one that's right for you. And then you click, you know, the price, and it's going to show up at your house, right? Like those things have been made so easy, where we live in this world of obfuscation where everything is so complex. It's kind of hidden, proprietary contracts, all those things that make it virtually impossible for a business owner to make a good decision on benefits without the help of a consultant, right?
Correct.
And so you become, you know, even more valuable, but it's also like, we wouldn't exist necessarily if the system wasn't so completely fragmented and complicated, right?
Yeah, there's a song about, you know, talking about Superman and talking about Tonto and everything. When I think about this industry, you know, I think of a world where you don't need those kind of superheroes anymore. I really dream of a world where you don't need insurance brokers or consultants. That would mean to me that the system is working.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're a long, long ways from that. And so what you need is a very solid consultant that can actually go through and understand the underpinnings of the plan, how it aligns to your business, and what to do about it.
Well, and I was telling you this too earlier. It's like, I see the world of consulting morphing so much and in real time and at a fast pace. The things that you are being asked to do on behalf of businesses, you would look on the surface and say that falls well beyond the scope of what a benefits consultant is supposed to do. Well, who cares? Go solve it for them, and they're going to be valuable to them. So the demands that are being placed on consultants, and I do differentiate between consultants and brokers. The demands are nearly infinite at this point. So I do think the value that brokers and consultants bring is still there. It's just evolving dramatically before our eyes. And so you'll always have a job, I would presume. But like, can we lead up to the formation of ExperINS? We got a little into the name, and we don't have to go into everything that materialized prior, but like, why did Trey Halbert want to start a benefits consulting firm from scratch?
Sure. So I had the opportunity to work on the healthcare side, and then had the chance to work on the brokerage or consulting side. And I saw a lot of opportunities where missteps, you know, the first company, nothing against them, but they're predominantly property and casualty. Like 70% of their revenue was coming from that. So benefits was never the first most important thing that they worked on, because they were solving the other problems first.
Okay.
Later on, we had created and built up an organization. And during that process, I think we learned a lot. We stumbled a lot. It was startup until ultimately those assets were sold to Alliant. And so I was a stay-at-home husband for about a year. And no better way to I got married to my lovely wife, Teagues. And then for the first 12 months, I was basically sitting at home. She's like, you need to get a job.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking about what I could do. And I was like, I'd like to start a brokerage and do it the right way, make sure that we really leverage data on the consulting side and really make an impact. And I want to do it with great people. Mm-hmm. And so I had one young lady, Stacy, call me up, and she's like, I talked to my husband and I saw that you're starting a company. I don't even care if you can't pay me. I'm going to join your company.
Wow.
And I was like, all right, this is something. I was like, well, let's make sure there's a role and responsibility for you. And if so, we're going to pay you to do that. And then I reached out to another friend of mine that I tried to bring on previously. And he's like, let's sit down with my wife. We'll see if we can do this together.
That's cool.
And then I had another friend of mine, and she was working for a large agency. And I had like 6 phone calls from them about, please come work for us. And so I was like, I'll go to lunch with you, but only if we actually get to have lunch and catch up as people. And about halfway through that lunch, I said, you haven't asked me to come work for that company. I said, are you gettable? And she goes, if you're going to do something, I want to see what that is, and I want to be a part of it.
That's cool.
And so that was the 4 of us that came together as partners to actually start to build ExperINS from day one.
That's really cool, man. And I got to ask you real quick before I forget, how'd you do it as a stay-at-home dad for a year?
Stay-at-home husband, still trying to become a dad.
Oh, sorry.
We're working hard on that front as well.
That's awesome.
The stay-at-home husband was really great. So before, I'd work like 60 to 100 hours a week. It was just kind of part of my DNA. And I feel like I had given up a lot of friendships by working so much and focusing so much on the business. And really, and getting to spend that time with my wife at home,
that's cool.
I realized that she's super important. And if you think about the pyramid of what you're going to do, and depending on where you are on faith, if it's God, that it's your spouse, that it's ultimately your job. If you think about building your business and that framework, then it starts with doing it from the right way that makes sure that you're getting to be your whole you, both when you're at work and you're at home. And so I wanted to create an environment that honored that and gave people time with their family, and also gave them the ability to enjoy that time. And so that's really what we came together as partners to build out ExperINS, was how do we make sure that there is balance between work and life, and kind of how do you actually do things well.
I'm going through that phase right now. You know, we were going over coffee about how many things fall on my plate in terms of responsibility. And like, I'm very conscientiously trying not to become a workaholic, because I have a wife, I have 2 young kiddos. It pains me to travel a lot. It pains me to leave them. You know, I know it's part of the job description, and maybe it's for a season of my life. But I've seen what happens when you let that go too far and your work consumes you, and then everything else falls by the wayside. I don't ever want that to happen. And so striking that balance as much as I can is important as I go through this particular season. But I like the way that you framed it up, is you wanted to build a business that allowed you to be able to excel in both personal and professional capacities. And I think I maybe even love that the most about you setting up that business that way. But then when it comes down to brass tacks of standing it up, you got great people now, you have a vision, going out and procuring the first clients, setting up systems and processes. Walk through the actual framework of blocking and tackling to build an agency.
So first things first was we had to do Simon Sinek's why. What's our why? Okay. So like ultimately want to start with mission, vision, values for us as an organization. What are we trying to accomplish? And then how do we actually build a business to do that? And we all had unique reasons for being a part of this industry. And like, I'll use Cliff as an example. His dad had a career-ending disability. So he learned firsthand what it was like to actually have the healthcare system come in and support you in your time of need. I had learned a whole lot of other things about it, how like it wasn't a business priority, that it was relegated to somebody else to handle that didn't have the financial acumen and business acumen to do it. And so as we started to go through our why, we said, let's build out an organization that accomplishes these things and honors these things. And how do we protect our businesses, help like businesses and people thrive?
Okay.
And so that was kind of the core that got distilled out of that. Next step was, we can't go out and compete with global consulting houses if we don't have the same resources. So we said, next thing we need to figure out, solve for, is where do we get those resources? Where do we find other firms like ours that are really growing and doing something different in the industry? And so that first led us to Benefit Advisors Network, and ultimately led us to True Network of Advisors. And what we found through this engagement with True is that there are a lot of firms like us around the country and around the globe that are doing great things. And so it allows us to collaborate and bring best practices to the market. Also allows us to identify solutions and to deliver them at scale, like a Pareto, for example. And so that collaboration, in True, you also have some other things that are wonderful. So they do a great job of marketing. They also do a great job of learning and development, which is something that I think our industry struggles to do. And then they find time for peer-to-peer connections. So we're very intentional. We meet with the True teams, even mastermind groups and everything like that, at least 4, if not 8 times a year. Okay. And then we also have a shared Slack channel and everything like that. So real time, we're getting through and collaborating. So it's like having the depth and breadth of 3,500 people globally, and the ability to focus on benefits and do what's right.
Yeah, and you obviously know I'm a big fan of Scott and the True Network, and know a lot of people in the organization, going to an event next week. But one of the things that really stands out to me about True, and I can't really speak from experience with UBA or BAN or some similar frameworks, is that it does actually get people in the same room that might be competitors on paper, and everybody's openly collaborating with one another. And to Scott's credit, he's done a good job of making sure local markets aren't too saturated with a bunch of competing agencies. But it creates this environment where you're not afraid to share ideas or ask questions, or even possibly say, I don't know how to solve this. Can somebody help me? And you got people willing and ready and able to help you solve it. I mean, that type of collaboration doesn't grow on trees. And so I definitely appreciate that, what he's built there. Pareto Health is the largest benefits captive in the United States. With nearly 3,000 captive members, 1.3 billion of stop-loss premium in force, and almost 1 million covered lives, no other benefits captive comes close to Pareto Health's scale. But it's not just about the numbers. Pareto Health is a mission-driven organization, and that mission has 2 distinct parts. Number 1, to make self-insurance simple and more accessible for small to mid-sized employers. And number 2, to arm them with the most powerful cost management tools on the market. So if you're an employer frustrated with your healthcare outcomes, or you're a benefits consultant looking for an alternative to the status quo, it's time to consider Pareto Health. Pareto Health, where employers come to do self-insurance right, to do it easily, and to do it at scale. So how has that helped you though from a backroom perspective, right? Are there certain systems you get access to or support?
There's definitely systems, access, resources, and then, the ability to get directly to an executive level person within the different carriers and vendor partners as well. So you've got, I'll use just some of the more simple and straightforward things. So hey, I'm looking to solve this problem. And we've used, we had a group reach out to us, and we use a program called Patient quite a bit.
Yeah.
And so Patient's like a virtual visa on your phone. And basically it allows people for medical, dental, vision, and also pet, if they experience any type of out-of-pocket, they can put something onto that card. And then they can pay it back over 12 months with no recourse debt back to the company. So Patient's an awesome program. Well, they heard us talking about it at one of the True events, get it pinged on the Slack, and they're like, hey, can you tell me the name of that company, when it works, where it works, and how it works, and can you get me in touch with the right rep? Mm-hmm. So I was like, yes, perfect. And so we were able to deliver that directly back to them. And so that kind of peer-to-peer exchange real time really helps. I'll use any number of the providers, being able to sit there and have direct access to an executive level person at a vendor that you haven't worked with much previously also really helps as you're kind of finding your footing and using different vendors and solutions that maybe you haven't used previously. And so True allows us to get directly to that. They've got an event coming up called Tables Turned this next month. And so basically, the vendors, instead of being at some little booth outside sitting there saying hey, will you take my tchotchke and can I maybe tell you about the product? They're going to have the agency, owners and leaders step on stage and share with the vendors what they're doing and how those vendor partnerships can work, which is completely different than any other way that I've seen this work. Normally, on our side, it seems like we're asking vendors, what can you do for us? But then what we're doing for this True event is actually saying, how can we work better together?
Yeah, that's cool, man. And by the way, anybody that's interested in Patient, definitely don't stop listening to this and go to the other episode. But I have featured the founder of Patient on, and I think it's a brilliant benefit, honestly. It's kind of one of its kind in that space. And while I don't think it necessarily solves for all the other side of the claims problems, what it does solve for is access to care, removing the impediment of the first dollar cost or exposure that an employee has. And I think it's very novel, and they've had success because it's a fantastic product. But in terms of the actual, let's say, first experience client, because you got to keep the lights on, right? You got to write business. How long did it take you guys to land that first one?
So it was 2 months in, and it was so funny. So Cliff Wedgeworth was at ADP, then at Gallagher, and we've been longtime friends. And we had both been calling on a couple of the same clients. One of them called us up, and she's like, I couldn't be more excited to see this announcement on LinkedIn. She's like, you and Cliff coming together, this is the dream team. That's cool. So she actually became our first client. She brought over a dream team poster from the old basketball deal, and then a jigsaw puzzle, and then also this other thing with some branded glasses and everything. And she's like, I want to be a part of what you're doing, because the way you act as humans, if this is how you're going to build the organization, I want to be a part of that.
That's cool.
And so it was great to have someone that had worked with us in uniquely different opportunities saying the coming together of this is exponentially better. And I feel like that's how we are with everyone.
Well, it's got to just feel good on a human level when somebody sees what you're building, believes in the vision, is willing to almost take a leap of faith to do business with you. That reinforces, I've been doing good work over my course of my career, and now somebody trusts me to manage their benefits, even if they know they're our first client, right?
Yeah. And that's without a referenceable account.
Yep.
When you've got someone that's willing to go first, and that really led into a whole lot of other things, because our experience with her was fantastic. And so she was able to be our first reference in a lot of those other things, early stages we were going out and growing.
Well, so what are the type of businesses that you focus on, whether it's a size segment? I know Austin's pretty tech heavy, right? So I'm imagining you got a lot of tech businesses, but how do you define who you are to that type of business?
Yeah, I would say that it kind of goes back to that statement around, strategy first, benefits, people first, service. If you're a company that wants to do a great job, We want to know what you're going to do as an organization, how you're going to get there, how you're going to support your employees as you accomplish this objective. And so we want to work with those types of companies. So great companies, great leaders, great cultures, doing great things. That typically means a company that's got a couple hundred to a few thousand employees that has some level of data and access to that data. So we can go through and say, how has your plan performed historically? What are the issues or weak spots that we see? How can we address them by aligning them to your business strategy? And then ultimately, will you take a multi-year approach to actually phase that in and do it? And if they say yes and have a short procurement process, like if we can talk to decision makers that can make a decision and execute on that vision, those are the people we want to work with.
Yeah, I would say double click on that, because the short procurement process, I totally understand what you mean, but why is that so important to you to work with that type of business?
So we want to work with people that are actually making decisions. And what we found is that long procurement process, you tend to be focused purely on price and not on value. And we believe if we're actually going to change one of the top 3 to 5 items on your P&L and make your benefits program a strategic asset, we need to be focused on that with a decision maker that's actually aligning that to their business strategy, not someone that's ultimately saying, okay, we need to spend more time, go through this process, get a couple more pennies off and everything there. We're like, let's talk about bending the big number and not worry so much about the small number. And I've found that even the most crazy procurement processes that can be with the most bureaucratic buyer, that process can be really eliminated or greatly shortened by working with the right decision maker and driving value at that level.
Yeah, obviously we agree as our business at Pareto, like the decision maker is important to be able to talk to. And that's why I love the middle market so much, is that you get to them. I mean, I was talking to, I can't say who, but I was talking to a guy the other day, and like his main focus, construction guy, is like, I just didn't want to know what's coming out of my boy's paycheck and know you guys are going to take care. And it was like that simple of a decision. We communicated the value, what we were trying to achieve, where he wanted to go, and he had a couple concerns, and after that it was a yes. I mean, the yes came very shortly after. You're talking to the guy that founded that business, and he cares about his people more so than even the business perhaps. And as long as we're aligning with that mission for him, we're good to go. And that you don't get that in that jumbo size segment.
And one of the things I like about Pareto's sales process is you're identifying who are the decision makers in this process and how do we get them in the same room.
Yes.
And fundamentally, that's one of the things that's often broken in our system, is because decision makers may sit over here in a boardroom or at a financial sponsor or at an executive level, where oftentimes benefits is handled at HR. And there's not always alignment between what is the organization trying to do and how are we aligning our people strategy to actually do it. And so your sales process does bring those people closer together, so you're at least thinking about it from the same page and same perspective.
Well, and you have to be able to speak to each one of those personas too. And what's interesting, a buddy of mine, he's kind of building a training course around teaching like deep benefits to HR people using kind of the college, the university system. And he said one of the universities here in town has a total rewards education track. Guess how many slides they spend on benefits in that entire course? Two. Yes, literally 2. Yeah. And it's literally like, here's what type of benefits exist. That's the scope of the education. You're going to get a total rewards degree out of that. And those are the people, and it's not to discredit them, but those are the people often tasked with managing a multi-million-dollar health plan. So of course it's difficult to get to them and convince them that self-funding or captives or things like that are important, because it's one of 25 things that they're responsible for. And so how do you speak, if you will, Trey, to that persona, the influences and concerns that they have within a business? How do you speak to them?
Sure. So I think first of it starts with our sales process and engagement process. So we want to go in with an executive that's actually going to serve as our sponsor throughout our sales process. So they're going to tell us about what's going on at the business, and then they're also going to engage us with the right resources in HR, accounting, finance, where the actual data lives and the people that do the day-to-day work exist. And then they're going to come back at the third step to be present when we actually present results. And so that's the first thing of getting, what are we trying to do at the executive level of the organization? What are we trying to do at HR or accounting or finance level? How do those things align? And where are they not aligned? And then at that comeback meeting is when we're doing the feedback presentation, is really when we actually bring these people together and we harmonize. We're like, this is what we heard at this meeting. This is what we heard at this meeting. Which of these ideas or issues are we really going to attack? And let's imagine that there's finite resources. We can only do so much and we can only move so fast. Which of these things are we going to attack first? And if we have that alignment, then it becomes very easy to say this aligns to mission, vision, values, and where we're going as an organization. This is how we align our people strategy to that. And here's how we execute that over a multi-year strategy.
Well, and how do you comfort them through the actual change process, right? Because change management is a very important part of implementing some new program that is foreign to perhaps that individual. And so how do you coach them through and support them so that they're not afraid to actually pull the trigger?
No, I think, in our industry, it's often a chain of three things. I'd say it's economics, logistics, and change management.
Okay.
There has to be a catalyst for action. And so on the change management component, I think what you've got to do is identify what are the pathways that you're using for communication throughout the organization? Where are they effective? With whom are they effective? And then during this process, we'll also have a group of questions that are both objective and subjective. So this is, what is this? This is, how does this make you feel?
Okay.
And so once you get both sides of that, then you actually craft a transition strategy or change management strategy that actually aligns to both, right? How do we do this in a methodical process that meets you where you are today and gives you what you need, and also squelches any fears or concerns that you may have throughout that process? And then we ask for feedback.
Okay.
So everything's got to have a postmortem. So like afterwards, how did we do? What did you think? What could have been done differently or better? And how will we change it for next year?
Yeah. That postmortem is so important. And I think a lot of people are afraid to actually ask for that feedback afterwards because for fear of what they're going to hear or what they did wrong. But the reality is if you don't solicit that feedback, you might be doing the same behaviors over and over again that are getting in your own way and you don't recognize it.
Correct.
I think of a nice corollary is it's hard sometimes to watch yourself on camera. I get it, right? And most people don't like to do it. But unless you actually observe yourself, whether you're presenting or doing a podcast like this, unless you actually observe yourself in arrears, you don't know ticks and ums and ahs and maybe certain uncomfortable positions you sit in or whatever it may be. Your pacing was too fast on a presentation. If you're not willing to almost scrutinize yourself objectively and then get feedback from other people who are observing it, you won't improve as a result. And so you just got to get over that fear.
ClaimDoc is a medical claim auditing and member advocacy company. We provide fiduciary services to employer-sponsored benefit plans, and allowing them to create an environment where we ensure that the benefit plans are being charged in a fair and reasonable basis.
My business is basically people, and it become a real simple transition. We thought it was going to be far more complex. I've saved, we'll say, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I could not say enough about ClaimDoc.
But that's not to dismiss the importance of the financial component, right? Because at the end of the day, whether it's a captive or any form of self-funding, it's a financial decision. And I don't think people contextualize how much $1 in savings to the bottom line actually does for their business in terms of valuation. So do you regularly get into conversations about how it improves the valuation of their business?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll answer that with two things. First of all, like we had a client recently, $10.5 million employee benefits program. We were able to save them $1.5 million. They're trading at a 7x valuation. That's $10.5 million of value creation. That's 100% to the bottom line of the organization, where they'd probably have to have $200 million in additional sales to achieve the same result. And so when we talk about that with the business owner, we're saying, what can we do to drive value on this side? Because ultimately, if you're going to have an IPO, if you're going to sell your business or whatever's going to happen to that business, you want to create value for the people that are there today,
right? Especially
the employees if they have stock option programs, et cetera. So when you frame it in that way, it really helps. I want to talk quickly about something that came up on a client that we're looking to transition to Pareto. And Kevin was meeting with someone the other day with a couple of partners of that company. And he's like, you've already made the decision to spend $2.5 million. Mm-hmm. The question is really, how are you going to fund that $2.5 million?
Yeah.
And I thought that statement in its own right was a great way to frame self-funding. Because people, when they hear self-funding, I think the moniker in its own right seems scary.
Yeah.
Fully insured sounds like very comforting, like, oh, I'm fully protected over here. Right. I feel like I'm at risk. But I thought the way Kevin framed that conversation is you've already made the decision to spend millions of dollars. Now we're going to talk about how do you finance it is really where you start to engage people on the right part of the conversation.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, man. And it's getting people around this idea of, hey, if you go into a fully insured plan, you're guaranteed, right? That cost is sunk effectively. That's also your best and worst case scenario.
Right.
Getting into the world of self-funding, it introduces a spectrum of possible outcomes where worst case scenario on paper could be technically worse than when you were fully insured. But there's also a best case scenario that has no limit on the bottom side as well. And so there's an element of risk that can be properly protected, but you are taking a calculated risk in doing so because you're betting on your ability alongside your consultant to optimize your plan and win. And it's the reason why 93% of the jumbos are doing that, is because they get that. It's now bringing this downstream to these small to mid-sized businesses and saying, you can have all the advantages that not an Aon, but I was going to say an Apple or a Costco or whomever, you can have all those same advantages and you can have the same protections that they want as well. And you could be 75 lives or 60 lives. I mean, it's a really fun story to tell, but you're also having to convince somebody that can name every employee by name and will look at them. They'll come into their office if they have an issue. They have concerns over, is it going to function as well as at least this ID card functions today, where they have assurance they have coverage, right? And so that's a conceptual framework that you've got to get built in their minds first. And then you can get them around to this idea that you can save money.
Yeah, and I think you framed it very well. If we looked at like a baseline of where premiums sit, let's say it's $1,000, and we looked at 10 employers, 6 or 7 of them would be below that line, meaning they're effectively subsidizing the 2 groups that are above the line, 2 or 3 that are above the line. And in that environment, do you really want to be fundamentally subsidizing someone else? Or do you want to be taking care of yourself? And if, like I'll use a captive model as bringing self-funded to kind of the mid-market employer, is you've got the ability now to leverage a group of other employers so that you've reduced your risk curve from something that's really high peaks and troughs to something that's far smaller standard deviation, far more predictable with better results. And so, I kind of think about this as almost like everything else in life. Typically, do you want to be around people that you like to be around and are doing the same thing that you're doing? If you sit there and say, we want to work on cost containment, bending the curve and getting people better outcomes in healthcare, this is what it looks like. A group of people that are deciding to come together in that.
It's an intentional risk
It's
pool.
very intentional.
Yeah.
And you may not have a good year because you're going to have a bad year every 4 or 5 years. But thinking about who do you want to be with and what do you proactively want to do? Do you believe that a better outcome is possible?
Yeah.
And if so, then how do you get on that journey faster?
When I always talk about this with employers, I have no silver bullet that will drive your risk down to 0.
Correct.
The only way that's going to happen is if you shut your doors as a business, right? So you accept the presumption or assumption of some risk. But it's how do we finance it and how do we mitigate it or even prevent it, right? And so actively doing so rather than passively hoping everything is going to correct themselves, which we know in the marketplace, if you kind of hear some of the fully insured renewals that are coming out, the bloodbath that's happening in the marketplace. I'm not celebrating that it's happening, but we've been talking about it for years that it was coming and it's finally here. And what I think you're going to see, Trey, is a real bifurcation or delineation of risk pools. And those that can self-fund in some form are going to do it. And those that can are going to be stuck with a worsening and worsening risk pool over time.
And you really hit on something important there. I mean, we used a quarterly earnings report against one of the large publicly traded health insurance companies recently. $2.5 million spend on this particular client's health plan, $900,000 of it on drugs. We knew at least $550,000 of that was coming back in rebates, and they were getting a 2% credit off the fully insured premium for rebates. I'm like, this is unattainable. So we showed them, here's what your PBM made. Here's what your traditional health insurance business made, and we need to make sure that we're getting that credit.
Yep.
And ultimately, that one is one that's moving a different route because they know that they can actually protect against that huge piece of the pharmacy spend by looking at how do they finance it and going into a self-funded model.
I see our jobs as helping people identify the source of pain or inefficiency, right?
Correct.
And it's not to over leverage on fear or tell them the sky is falling, but it's to say, this isn't working. You don't really know why, but I can tell you why it's not working. I can point you to the few reasons why it's not. And when you identify that source of pain, then you can address it. Then you can solve for it, right? And that's all that I view our job is to do, is identify the source of the pain and offer a remedy for that pain.
Correct. And I think that aligns to almost any business owner or executive team, right? They have to make decisions quickly with limited information, limited data, and they've got to make big dollar decisions. And that's the same with health plans, right? So if I sit there and say, how do I make the language simple?
Yeah.
How do I bring awareness to the right people? And how do I show them a pathway to a different outcome? And that's really where ExperINS could come in and help employers do that. And then through that process, they make those decisions quickly, the same way they make every other business decision. as opposed to we use all these words that we made up in the health insurance world. And that industry makes it hard to decipher.
I tell every young person that comes into this business, the first order of operations is to learn the language.
Correct.
You have to speak the language. And then you have to synthesize that language to a layperson to be able to communicate what it means. But your barrier to entry is the acronyms and the verbiage that we use that don't exist anywhere else.
Correct.
And it's shame on us for making it so complicated. Well, I want to ask you, since you've been in this business for a long time, I love the experience model, and we'll touch on your culture. Don't let me forget to ask about the culture. But what actually excites you in terms of innovation in the marketplace? It's solving real problems for businesses.
I feel like our industry is ripe for disruption.
Yes.
And I think of it in every single aspect of what we're doing, even just what you're talking about. Complex vernacular, words that we made up, acronyms that we made up. How do I make it simple and consumable? And so really where I see this industry going is to leveraging things like agentic AI.
Okay.
And really having, like, for lack of better words, a parent on your shoulder, someone that can help you engage. Like, help me understand, you're a world-renowned physician dealing with these types of issues. Explain it to me like I'm in the 5th grade to make sure I can understand it. Mm-hmm. What actions or steps do I need to do to achieve this outcome? Like, there's certain things, that's a very simple use case, but I feel like we have to make the member experience that easy to get fundamental change through it. There's a ton of different products that are and services that are happening, but I really believe that agentic AI has the ability to really help at every aspect of what we do on the brokerage and consulting side, through the communication, education, training, and even on the back end of service and support. And I'm eager to see.
Well, agentic AI is using AI agents, right?
Correct.
Right. So deploying an AI agent to do a certain service or troubleshoot, et cetera. Do you have like a real world use case of an agent in AI that you see operating today?
So the use cases are a little bit awkward and still being really refined right now. But where I do see stuff that's happening, I'll take you back to like the 90s when I was on the insurance company side, or I guess it was 2000s, early 2000s. And at that point in time, I would get this quote from Aon. And I had to go into an Excel spreadsheet and put the actual plan designs, the rates and everything in there, or they wouldn't accept my proposal.
Yeah.
That has actually become AI, where AI is pulling that information, putting it into a system, leveraging the data that's in that system and producing a result.
Yep.
That's a very simple use case that a lot of agencies today are either outsourcing to a group over in India or China, or they're actually still doing it in their organization. So I think those are simple ways that AI is starting to do that. I feel like the traditional general agency model, where a lot of brokers would use these resources, is really starting to change to what I'd call like an electronic GA, where you're really starting to see the evolution of that AI come into place. I think that really at some point in time in the not too distant future, will really be at being able to go from quote to card in AI, and being able to go through, what do the proposals look like? What should I buy? What decision-making things do I need in order to make that decision? How do I put it in here? How do I issue the policy? How do I enroll people? And how do I issue the ID card?
Well, see, that brings us back full circle to a comment you made earlier, and I often think about this. Let's say that gets perfected. What role does a broker or a consultant play?
So that part, and I long for this day. I think it'll happen most quickly at the smaller segment employers that don't have as many options. And I think really what you'll start to have then is thoughtful discussions around what are we really going to do that bends the needle over time, and how can we do it? And through that is where I think, we hire people for their brains, to be thought leaders, to be super smart at experience. And unfortunately spend a lot of their time doing day-to-day menial tasks. I believe that AI will help us do more of those menial tasks more quickly, so that we can use our brains for the things that they're intended to use to help truly bend the cost curve and really use high-power consulting and actually go through and leverage AI to support us in that process.
Having spent years working alongside healthcare leaders, brokers, and employers, I know how overwhelming healthcare can feel for our customers. We've all been there. Those renewal conversations that never seem to get easier. Rising pharmacy costs and medical costs, and no real transparency into where healthcare dollars are going. That's why I'm excited about Nomi Health. They're not just fixing the old system. They've rebuilt self-funded benefits from the ground up. With Nomi's network, you can offer something truly different. No copays, no deductibles, zero out-of-pocket costs when members see a provider. It's the kind of benefit that makes everyone ask, why hasn't healthcare always worked this way? Ready to bring your clients something different? Visit KnowMeHealth.com and see how KnowMe is rebuilding healthcare, one employer and one community at a time. Well, one of the things that I've seen on the subject of agentic AI or using agents, and you're talking about spreadsheet and you're talking about the RFP process. I watched that in real time firsthand in my previous company, PlanSight. It's like it started as key in everything into a consistent framework and then benchmark benefits side by side. Then it morphed into, well, the carriers, let's make it easy for them to ingest their proposals. Then now it's moved as technology is caught up to AI is extracting everything off these physical proposals, interpreting it, placing it side by side, and even giving you indicators as to why this benefit is described as such. And if you want to see the original version of the language, click here and it's visible, right? So there's, in very near order, a human being's not going to have to play any role in any of those steps, from what you said, quote to card. And then you start to beg the question, what does your account manager that manages RFPs do? I don't think you eliminate that person's job. You free them up not to do a bunch of busy work 8 hours a day, right? Or interpret and check, and is this correct? Let's go back to the carrier and say, hey, I need you to clean up this language because this isn't what we asked for. There's so much more intelligence added to the equation, but it doesn't make that person obsolete. It just morphs the role that they play in your organization.
The goal is to elevate everybody.
Yes.
I mean, ultimately, AI should be there as a thought partner to help you do your job better and to really elevate where you're spending your time. So I agree with you completely on that.
Well, and on the claim side, and talking about innovation, at the end of the day, we still have to solve for these egregious price points that people are paying when they interface with the health system. Yeah. So whether that be things like high performance networks or reference-based pricing, claims reviews, audits, et cetera, what else are you deploying to help solve some of that issue?
Well, I believe, man, right now, I feel like we're getting better. I feel like we're still missing on a couple of key areas.
Okay.
Like, I'll use reference-based reimbursement as an example. I think it's challenging for some people when you come in and say, here's your health plan and here's your attorney, right? Yeah. I mean, it just normally like, okay, here's two things I don't really like, insurance and attorneys, right? and so what I do like about reference-based reimbursement is like, you can think of it, no longer do you have a network. Mm-hmm. Now you can go basically anywhere that you need to go for the best care that you can receive. And I feel like some of the tools that have been coming around, like the old school healthcare blue book and some of these other things, help you identify where can you get, better price care or better quality care. And I feel like a lot of that's becoming easier with these readable files. But ultimately, I feel like we still have to arm members with the knowledge and understanding of words to actually go through and use their healthcare plan. Like when I get a routine venipuncture, what do those words mean?
Yeah.
That's just a blood draw. And so like, how do you help people know what they need and when they need it and how to navigate that care correctly? I think that there have been a lot of advances in the virtual healthcare space. And so I'll pivot a little bit to one that I see as a huge need, like mental health.
Okay.
So like, I think mental health is a huge issue, and it's always been a huge issue. I think the COVID era kind of eroded some of the like it was low tide, and you got to see more of these issues than you ever saw before. But what it led to was additional access problems.
Okay.
And so like, there's a program called Headway that's rolled out, and basically they became the back office for a lot of individual psychologists and psychiatrists. And so through that program, it's kind of like ZocDoc, where you can actually go through and say, what am I looking for? I'm looking for, I don't know, let's say a Hindu therapist that is a male that is maybe identifies as homosexual. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking to, as a young child, trying to find somebody I could sit there and say, these are things that I'm looking for and I'm trying to find access to. By the way, they're available today at 2:00. Yeah. Where before, access to like mental health was such a trying deal. Hey, I've got an issue today. One, I can't find a therapist. Two, I can't get you in for 2 months. And what happens in the meantime?
Yeah, no kidding.
And so like, how do we actually prepare people with the tech and tools to get them the right care at the right time? And, I've seen this happening more and more frequently on like virtual care as a primary, steward to kind of get you to the right spot in the healthcare system. We all have our devices in our hands. Mm-hmm. And I feel like there's got to be a better way to interact with the system, where most of the people in the United States now that are working are younger people. They're always phone first.
Yep.
Right. So how do I actually use this to navigate me to the best care, help geofence things where I need it, help me get to the less expensive price point for a prescription, et cetera. So like, I'll give you another, for instance, last week I was at the dermatologist. I had a couple of moles and skin tags taken off, and they sent me to Costco to get my prescription. And I go in there, swipe my UHC card, and it comes out as $46.94.
Okay.
And then as I'm walking around, the guy that sits behind the counter is a nice guy. I always talk to him. His name's Zach. And I'm like, hey, Zach, how are you doing today? He's like, great, man. Thanks a lot for asking. He's like, I know your name's not James. It's Trey, right? And I'm like, yeah, it's Trey. He's like, good to see you, Trey. He goes, did you know I ran this through on the Costco membership price, and you can get it for $11. And so I was like, hold on, I could get it not using my insurance for $11 versus $46 through my UHC card. And I thought, man, well, what happens if we were able to get more Zachs to help more people get their prescriptions more effectively and more cost affordable? And I thought, this is something that like some of the apps are starting to do with geolocation. Did you know you go an extra 1.7 miles to get this?
Yeah.
But how do you actually do that at time of service, where you are, where you need? And then ultimately, I think about this too from a much bigger issue. Like if you think about the CAA or you think about fiduciary responsibility, what is my obligation as an employer if I got you a UHC benefit card, but ultimately you can get a price that's lower on Costco? And that speaks to a much bigger issue in this whole industry, which I don't understand, is that how can the exact same service vary so much in cost between where you go or which coverage you have? So if I'm Medicare or Medicaid, I get one rate. If I'm over here commercially insured, I get another one. If I'm on an HMO, I get a different. Like at what point in time does cost and value align? And how do we get people to the right benefits at the right time? And I feel like this is one of those things where reference-based reimbursement can actually work. Because now what I've done is I've democratized what the cost is. And now if I could increase where quality is, then we could talk about the overall value or total cost of care. That's where
in your prescription drug example too, it begs the question, why does a company worth, I don't know, how many hundreds of billions of dollars unable to get a lower price than Costco is on their Costco membership card for a drug? We know the answer is because they don't necessarily want that price to be lower.
There's a misalignment.
There's a misalignment of incentives that's there. I mean, to just, since it's pertinent today, we released an episode with a local pharmacy here in Fort Worth called Forest Park Pharmacy, and they switched from an insurance-based model to a cash model. And I saw Nathaniel came up with a headline too. It showed that they lost 70% of their customers essentially overnight, but they doubled their revenue as a result of it because the misalignments in the way that they were being reimbursed. They were discovering, hey, we're actually making less money than these drugs cost us to procure based on the insurance reimbursement. What are we doing? And once they remove the insurance part of the equation, they realize the majority of these drugs that we get for like true cost, we can just turn around and put a little cost plus margin on top of it, lower the cost of the individual, get rid of the reimbursement game altogether, and we have a healthier business as a result. And that's what people don't necessarily understand, how misaligned the incentives are when you go through the system that we've created, which is why reference-based pricing, I like it because it approximates what the true cost should be. It's not, it's maybe a back-end way to achieve that proxy, but it tells you, roughly speaking, how much more you're overpaying when you're going through a traditional network for reimbursement.
And I think there's a lot of these programs too, that what people are looking for is some level of cost certainty, which is something that this industry has historically not provided. Like if I'm going to go to the doctor and I'm going to get these moles removed, what have you, what am I going to spend while I'm there? Like when you get invoices from 6 or 7 different companies that were never at that doctor's visit with you, like how do I know what I'm going to spend when I actually go to the doctor? And so some of these other programs like Assurist or Careaway or some of these other things that are starting to actually say what's the total cost of care or episode of care cost. I think those types of programs really help members when they can sit there and say, now I at least know for certain what am I going to spend when I go.
Well, and guess what? If you make some of these choices, we'll actually waive your out of pocket as well as an employer. So we incentivize you properly to make that decision.
We're seeing that a whole lot on the pharmacy side. So using external vendors that are sitting there and saying, instead of this drug costing $60,000, $70,000, we'll pay 100% of it if you'll take the, biosimilar, which is basically the therapeutic exact same drug with the same amount of side effects. If you'll take this one that costs $900, we'll pay 100% of it. And that to me is something that can work. We've also used it for international sourcing, which I will tell you, I know a number of people are scared to go with some of these programs or to roll them out. I'd say I would encourage you to talk to members that have experienced it firsthand. because the story that end user tells you about getting that drug for free and how it impacted their family. We had a client the other day that sent us an email and said, "Thank you so much. I was spending over $700 a month for this drug. Now I spend $60."
Yep.
And so being able to do those types of things really impact the person. And she's an HR leader that actually knows what she's doing. We had another one that uses international sourcing through CRX, and she's sitting there. She's like, "I'm taking free prescriptions. I know 3 other people on our leadership team are also getting their prescriptions for free because we go through this product and this program." And they're like, and it's saved us, as a family. Yeah. Like, imagine that's from the executive level of the organization. Imagine what it's like for the line worker.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And then once you understand it's coming from developed nations, a lot of times it's Canada as an example, the whole chain of custody and procurement process is above board. It's the same manufacturer and the same packaging. It might have French on it if it's coming from Canada as well, but it's the same drug. And so all those concerns that might naturally arise, I'm not saying that skepticism isn't warranted, but once you go through the process, you realize like all I'm doing is getting it in a different way and paying exponentially lower for the same medication.
Correct.
Why say no to that?
Yeah.
Right? And so can we go back, as I told you, I want to make sure we touch on culture. And you were showing me even your laptop earlier where you've got some stickers on it, which I think define the brand of ExperINS. But talk to me about the importance for you of building a culture, a palpable culture.
I think culture is the most important thing that you have in any organization, because without it, it fails. And so I believe that culture actually should lead to how do you celebrate behaviors? How do you also call out the ones that are not appropriate? And so we've got 5 core values at our organization, and these were recently updated in a ton of font. And some of them I would say are a little bit provocative, so I apologize in advance if there's anyone listening at home. You can insert some different.
I don't think I have any too sensitive of listeners.
The first one's no assholes. Yeah. And so we don't want them as employees, we don't want them as clients, and we don't want to work with or around them. Yep. So that's a barrier for entry to the organization. It also talks about how you should behave when you're working with others. Right. Okay. So you should really actually have a baseline belief that everyone has your best interest at heart, and you should work to collaborate in that way. The next one's get shit done and have fun. And so we believe that you're going to spend, probably close to half your awake hours with the people that you're working with and your clients. And so what we want to do is we want you to feel accomplished when you go home at the end of the day. We want you to feel like you got stuff done. And we want to make it an enjoyable experience, because if you have to spend time with these people, you should really enjoy the people that you're around.
Absolutely.
And so there's a couple of others that go down. One's called Elevate Awesomeness. And so what we're trying to do there is do things in a better way. Like, hey, this is how we did it before. How can we do it a little bit better, right? Mm-hmm. And so at each point, we're always trying to, like James Clear, 1% better every day, right? Yeah. So just get a little bit better, and then you don't have to do those things. The next one's called Leave a Ladder. And this is probably the one that I see most people align to the most. And that's really about when you do the hard work and you carve out a path and you do something to take it to the next level, how do you leave that ladder to make it easier to bring the next person along? Mm-hmm. And so we really focus on that leave a ladder philosophy. And the last one is something that I think is really paramount to what we do as an organization. And that one's advocate relentlessly. Mm. The system's designed to tell you no. And the system's inherently difficult and bureaucratic. And so what we encourage our employees to do is realize that you're engaging with people when it matters most. Like when the health system has failed them or one of their loved ones is like, hey, I need a kidney transplant for my son. I don't know if I'm a donor, right? So like, what do you do at that point in time? And so we encourage employees to do a couple of things. One is if you hear no, work with the other side to see if there's a pathway to yes. Okay. And oftentimes when you work through a bureaucratic system, no is the first answer, but there's oftentimes a solution around it. And so I'll tell a quick story about Christina. So we had one of our clients, an executive, passed away, and he had cancer, went out on disability, and then passed away. That client was an employee that everybody loved, and so they started a GoFundMe campaign. Mm. And so they were trying to raise money for the wife and 3 daughters and really help them out. And so what Christina did was she went back and said, I believe this person should have been on waiver of premium. Like they should have actually continued to pay disability premiums and, in fact, the life insurance premiums. And so by going through this process, she was able to get an extra $450,000 for that family and really make an impact. It'll never make up for them losing their father.
No.
but it'll certainly help them with everything else that they're encountering as they're going through this difficult time. And so that kind of leans back into that advocate relentlessly and really make an impact for other people.
Well, yeah, because can you imagine the inverse outcome, right? Yeah. So Christina didn't have that intensity to follow up and ensure that it was paid by the letter of the contract. Maybe it just got left or somebody didn't care. Well, that family missed out on money they were owed to the tune of $450,000 that, like you said, the transition, let's say the mom maybe wasn't working, right? The transition for her to be back on her feet, to pay the bills, the mortgage is paid, et cetera. Kids can still get clothing and school supplies, all that stuff. Just by a simple action of going a little bit above and beyond, put that family in a better position to transition. And without it, you could imagine the inverse being true, right?
Correct.
And Christina didn't have to do that either, right? She chose to do it because that was the value system that you put forth, but also I'm sure that she just embodies, and she might have naturally done it anyways. If you work with great people, they're probably going to proactively do that type of thing themselves. But that is a great example of how you put forth values and people are living those values out.
I agree. And I would tell you, Spencer, that we recently we changed our hiring process.
Okay.
So we're hiring for their intellect and ability to do the job. But Jake, my chief of staff, is phenomenal. And he's like, how do we actually interview for our values to check and make certain it's a culture fit on the front end and the back end? And so when we were going through that interview process, like, explain what our values are. And then we ask someone, like, which of these do you embody and why? Which one means the most? And when they start to tell you stories about how they've advocated relentlessly for something or how they left a ladder for somebody else, that's where you really start to see that culture becomes a underlying fabric of the organization that helps you grow to where you want to get. And it also helps with accountability between one another. And so people look to one another like, are you exhibiting this value or not?
Well, cool. Leave the ladder was the one that stood out to me. I know you said that was the most popular, but you often have time, like with doing this kind of stuff, to self-reflect and like, what's the purpose? Why am I spending time and money to do a podcast, right? I think ultimately what I recognized early on in creating content is I had knowledge inside of my head that wasn't common knowledge. And there was also nobody out there teaching it publicly. And so just by the nature of taking the step to teach it, I started to get this feedback from people like, could you do more videos? Or wow, you taught me this. Or I'm using your videos now to teach our agency about self-funding, or whatever the example may be. But my favorite one is a couple times people have messaged me and said, I watched your videos to prepare for an interview and I got the job.
Oh,
and they use the subject matter to help be able to intelligently speak through whatever the job description required. And like, I didn't mean to do that, but that's an example of leaving the ladder. And if I think about any impact that I might make from this show, is helping build up the next generation of people that can take the mantle and take it and carry it forward.
And I think you've done a great job of bringing awareness,
hopefully,
to a very difficult topic.
Yeah.
You know, self-funding is oftentimes something that's taboo, and you're hoping the person that brings that solution to you knows what they're talking about. But with you doing this podcast actually creates that environment where people can go seek out that wisdom, learn, and actually guide people better, or point to resources and different products and services that can help. And so I believe that that's working. When I hear people in my industry, my peers and my competitors say it through, oh, I heard this on Self-Funding with Spencer, that to me says that it's making an impact beyond what you see every day.
I love that, man. I appreciate you saying that. So why don't we do this, Trey? Let's land the plane here. We have our standard, if you will, closeout questions. But the reason I always ask these questions is because I get a different answer every single time. So in the interest of thinking about where the puck is going, right? What are you anticipating, maybe near-term changes in healthcare that you're planning for with your business?
So there's a ton of things. I think on the member experience side, there's going to be some great things there. I believe on different ways to control cost and help people get to better outcomes. You know, right now I feel like the cost and quality tools largely lead to cost first.
Yeah.
But I think where we're going next is going to be a better embodiment of cost and quality.
Okay.
And I believe that ultimately where this has happened historically, insurance companies seem like they've been trying to work down the cost and direct people to the lower cost of care. What I would say is we start to look at total cost of care.
Okay.
And I think we're going to see better rewards going to better providers. And hopefully what that will also lead to is additional learning and development so that those better doctors and providers are actually bringing other people along so that you actually start to share that knowledge, leave a ladder, if you will, to really make it where you're getting to the best care, or you can believe that you're going to get the quality of care that you deserve no matter where you go.
Yeah, it's this weird kind of a dichotomy, if you will, because you don't want physicians necessarily to have to go out and compete for populations, but ultimately you want a competitive environment where the best surgeons, he or she is winning, right? Or attracting more clients because they do better work. And so that at the end of the day, like if we can create a little bit of competition where you have awareness of how good they actually are at their job, and then the cost part of the equation has to be factored in as well. And I think what most people don't realize is there's usually an inverse relationship between cost and quality. The lower cost often is the best quality as well because they can do it repeatably and at scale. Correct. But we have to make that information visible to the average person that's just going to try to find a doctor.
I agree. And also reps matter. So like I'll use a good friend of mine, prostate cancer. He went and talked to multiple different providers. The average person does 2 surgeries a year. He ended up going to one that does 2,000.
Whoa.
And so the difference for him, he's fine, everything's healed, everything's great, he's cancer-free. But by doing that extra research himself, was able to find out who does this most frequently, who gets the most reps in, and who has the best outcomes. Because if you're 2 for 2, you got 100% great outcomes. But if you're 2,000 for 2,000, that 100% matters a whole lot more. Oh, yeah, and I really believe that the tech and tools and AI will really help people get to a better one of those. And I hope that those providers, because to me it is some level of a competition. You want to be the best in your game. Those people should be rewarded and actually do a better job for other people. That's a more meaningful impact on society. So I really hope that we start to reward those people that are doing the best job.
Well, to your point, what do you call a D student that graduates from medical school?
Doctor.
You still call them doctor. Yeah. And how do you know? And it's not to disparage them, because going through med school is obviously a daunting thing. But there is a spectrum of ability even within the highest achievers that are doctors, right? And how do we get to elevate those A players and B+ players, if you will, by attracting more people to them, right? And I think we can do a better job as facilitators to ensure that people are going to those type of locations. All right, so last question, Trey. This is all you, whatever you want to say. Closing thoughts, either summarize the episode, a call to action. What do you want people thinking about as they go about their day?
I think as you think about this business, think of it as your opportunity to make a tremendous impact on other people. And that may or may not be people that you know or know well. But if you start with the company and what they're trying to accomplish, and you think about their people strategy and how people help them accomplish that, really look at this career as an opportunity to get involved and make a profound impact on both businesses and people. And so I would say that, at ExperINS, our goal is to help businesses and people thrive. And I think for everyone out there listening, I would encourage them to also think of this as an opportunity to serve and an opportunity to make a difference. And so I'd just say do that.
Awesome. That's an amazing way to end it. So Trey, thanks so much for making the trek up from Austin. I know this will be the first of many times we sit down together, but I really do appreciate you coming on the show, man. It's been great to chat with you.
Great to see you, Spencer. Thanks so much.
My pleasure.